Hey there, Dr. Christianson here. I want to talk about high-fat diets can actually be a danger to your thyroid. Now, going into this, I want to make it clear that there's overlap between high-fat, low-carb, low-protein. We only get macronutrients from these three sources, protein, fats, or carbs, and they're always going to total 100%. So you can't talk about one without really implying the others. So please know that high-fat diets are also going to be lower protein diets, lower carb diets, some combination of that. So with that premise, high-fat diets are more popular these days, yet they can be harmful for those with thyroid disease. Some ways that directly impact the thyroid and other ways that affect parts of your body that is relevant to your thyroid health and your immune system. So let's go into that a bit. For starters, thyroid antibodies. There was actually a large paper recently showing that a diet that was low in fat, very high in protein, could lower thyroid antibodies for those with Hashimoto's. Now, this diet was rather narrow in food selection and rather narrow in fiber options, so I wouldn't really encourage it for long term. But over the course of a few months, a diet that was primarily lean protein, poultry, fish, small amounts of lean meat, but mostly poultry and fish and low-calorie vegetables, did seem to really drop, especially thyroid peroxidase antibodies for people. So no other big drawbacks, but it was a brief period of time. It was just a 60-day time frame, if I remember correctly. So short term could be useful. Another direct effect is that high-fat diets can hurt the conversion of T4 to T3. So your thyroid makes T4. If you're on meds, you're also taking T4. If you're taking synthetics like Synthroid, Levoxyl, or even natural desiccated thyroid, you're mostly taking T4. That's more useful when your body gets to convert it into T3 and T2. And if your diet is too high in fat, you actually make more reverse T3 and not as much of the active T3 out of the T4, in which case you can have low thyroid symptoms even with adequate amounts of thyroid hormone. Other ways that high-fat diets can hurt the thyroid and those with thyroid disease have to do with the intestinal function. We've seen so much data that your immune system, when it works right, will function because of good gut health, and that will lower the attack on your thyroid and the damage to it. High-fat diets have been shown to raise the amount of lipopolysaccharides, which are the harmful things from bacteria that happen from leaky gut. They trigger inflammation, they trigger autoimmunity, they create cytokine responses, and diets too high in fat engender more of those to come into the bloodstream. The other drawback to the gut is that diets too high in fat starve the good bowel flora. So we see greater issues of leaky gut, SIBO overgrowth, yeast overgrowth. Your good bacteria, nothing helps them more than food. They live on food like we live on food. But their food is good carb and rich diversity of fiber. And that's relative to how much food comes into your system. So if the diet, even if you've got some great healthy good carbs like veggies, but they're only a small part of your calories, not just food bulk, but calories, that starves the good flora and leaves them less able to help you out properly. Another big category is about serotonin metabolism. So tryptophan from the diet enters the brain and makes serotonin. You know enough of that and you're happier, you've got better mood. You can also make melatonin, get better quality sleep at night. And also your body can manage inflammation better. There's less chronic pain, less nerve pain. But without a certain amount of good carbohydrate, with too much fat in the diet, you cannot properly make serotonin. And that's why many are tired or depressed when they're consuming too little of that. So those are some other drawbacks. Then we think about performance, physical performance and exercise. Many with thyroid disease are fatigued. They've got muscle pain. They can't train as well. That's worse on a high-fat diet. The data is strong that you can function burning fats, but you can't make glycogen on a high-fat diet. So glycogen is your body's favorite fuel, and that's a stored dense version of good carbohydrate. When that's lacking, not only do your muscles hurt, but the data has shown that higher fat diets can make it to where you don't really benefit from exercise in terms of the ways in which your body would have less inflammation, recovery, all those sorts of things. That benefit is not really there when the diet's high in fat. Last thing that's relevant is infertility. So many with thyroid disease may have PCOS or other factors affecting their fertility. It's been shown, and this study was a really great example of how bad carbs are really bad, but good carbs are really good. And all fat isn't the answer. So the study showed that those on the diet lowest in high fiber, and actually fiber from grains specifically, those with the least amount of grain fiber had the lowest rates of fertility, and higher rates of grain fiber encourage fertility. Now, the parallel was that the fiber study also showed that those with the highest intakes of processed refined carbohydrates also had lower rates of fertility. So bad carbs are really bad. That data is so clear. I could not agree more. But many have looked at that and completely thrown the baby out with the bathwater and said, oh, carbs are bad. We must never touch carbs. But this study showed elegantly that good carbs were very helpful in the same way in which bad carbs are harmful. So fats, carbs, protein, we all need some of each of those. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was all vogue to go extreme low fat. I argued against that. I told people that was a bad idea. We need some healthy fats. Some have argued about going extreme low protein. And I've said that's not a good idea. We need all these macronutrients in healthy ratios and good amounts. Protein, I would argue that most do well with about 1/4 to maybe 35% of calories from protein. And fats, probably you could go within that range, maybe a little higher, perhaps 20%, 30-35%. And then carbs, the rest. So that could be as low as 30, but that could be as high as 55. And, the Catawbans are probably the most studied Paleolithic tribe on the planet. They've lived on a 70% carbohydrate diet, and they're documented to be free of disease. It's funny because most of the claims about paleo diets and the benefits from those go back to the Catawbans. They're the most solidly researched for having no chronic disease, very little, no real obesity, no real diabetes. They're on 70% carbohydrate diet. And their flora is healthy and diverse. So high fat is not the answer, and especially bad if you've got thyroid issues. Dr. Christianson signing off. Back with you really soon.